Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. So today's video is going to be on a review for episode 4 of Them on Amazon Prime. I've already done episode 1 through 3 on the channel, so make sure you check those out if you haven't. If you have, thanks for tuning in, and let's get into episode 4. Things are starting to diverge more in this plot, and I think the easiest way to do the review, at least for this episode, is to follow each character and see what happened in the episode. So let's start with Ruby. So we saw a lot of supernatural delusions start to happen with Lucky, with Henry, even with Gracie Jean, but we haven't quite seen it from the perspective of Ruby Lee. Now we got to see that in this episode. Ruby goes to school after being bullied and harassed, and if you remember, she met Doris in the principal's office, and the Doris was nice to her in a very micro-aggressive way. Well, this episode, she goes to lunch and she sits by herself, and Doris comes and whisks her away, and they're laughing and they're holding hands, and immediately I was really suspicious because I'm just like, I don't trust this girl. You know, why is she taking a specific liking to Ruby? And they end up, going to the school basement, seeing two people hook up. I don't know if it was a student and a teacher or two students. I couldn't really tell, but it looked inappropriate. They share secrets or whatever, and then they run to the school closet to kind of hide out. Something really weird happened when the janitor opened the door. Only Ruby was there. And so, that leads me to believe that obviously Doris is not real. It's a figment of her imagination. And this is the first delusion that Ruby gets to experience in this show, as the other characters, as her family members, have been experiencing that. Something interesting that I noticed is that, when children are feeling bullied, or they don't feel welcome, or they're feeling outcasted in their family, they tend to have imaginary friends in their youth. And so I feel like that's what Ruby's manifestation is, that she has an imaginary friend that's gonna help her get through school and feel like she has a friend and feel wanted. She's a little bit older. She's in high school at 14 and 15, but I think it doesn't really matter her age. I feel like that's her how she's coping and how she's gonna compensate. And we're gonna see this Doris and what other characters of her figment of her imagination are gonna develop for Ruby. So that was interesting to see this episode. As we know, Henry has started to see his delusions. It started when he got bumped in the workplace, and then he saw that burning man with burning skin, which is likely a serviceman that has experienced nerve gas or mustard gas, something that's part of his past trauma. And so, I think it's going to be just like Ruby has her own, imaginary friend that's helping her through her situation. I feel like what's tied to Henry is his past. And so his manifestations of his delusions are going to be, something from his past, which is his time as an army man. So we see Henry, he goes to work, and he experiences something really interesting. His boss and a fellow engineer walk into the elevator, and it's like he's invisible. They don't even acknowledge him. I didn't really understand the whole dropping of the pen and him, giving the pen. I think maybe that broke that third wall that, I'm here, hello. But they mentioned that there's a party, and, obviously Henry didn't know about it because he wasn't invited. Big surprise there. He ends up showing up there, and he has another delusion. He sees a minstrel show, someone in blackface performing, and all of us start to wonder, is he really seeing that? Are we seeing that? Is it really happening? It's really interesting that we're all wondering that, because it's like, damn, that's not even far-fetched for that to be a thing. Like, for all we know, it was, some private thing that happened back then. Today, we'd be like, oh no, that's a delusion. No one's gonna do that today. But it's just interesting how we even have to second guess that. But as we saw, it was a delusion, and it just made me think, Henry's delusions are tied to some type of trigger of racism, some type of his post-traumatic, this stress disorder, which I think he does have from being in the army and that treatment. But anytime he gets triggered with the microaggression, I think that that's when he has his delusions, because he wasn't invited to that party. Because he was ignored in the elevator, also because he was hit by someone last episode 2, as if he's just invisible. All those times he's had a delusion and has seen something that's a figment of his imagination. So I feel like also he also kind of almost changed and became a different Henry when he was faced with those neighbors who were confronting him in last episode. So I feel like every time he's triggered or met with microaggressions or macroaggressions or any type of racism, that's when he goes into his alternate state, which was really interesting to see. Of course, Lucky's story, her storyline is the most interesting, I think, so far of all the characters, even though I think they're all interesting. Because she's going through a lot right now. In the beginning of the episode, they were faced with Mammy dolls, Sambo dolls, N-word heaven burned on their lawn by these racist white neighbors. And, Henry keeps the level head as he has, but Lucky is just having much more of a harder time coping with this. She goes to her realtor, tries to see if she can sell the house. She visits Mrs. Johnson, who was mentioned by her realtor, saying, listen, you're not the only black family in this neighborhood. Maybe, you can stick this out. If they can do it, you can do it. She finds this Mrs. Johnson, and I don't know what she went there for. Maybe she went there to say, listen, how did you deal with this? Or what did you go through? I think that's where the conversation started, but there's something so creepy about Mrs. Johnson. Not only that, Mrs. Johnson also knows about this shadowy figure in the black hat, the same one that orchestrated the attack on Lucky on the bus last episode. So that was interesting to see, like, okay, wait, this black family also knows this imaginary black hat man. But then the eyes, something about the eyes that also, Lucky also has these eyes that, like, I feel like when she's about to change or she's feeling something, her eyes get big and bulgy, and Mrs. Johnson's eyes did the same thing. She talks about scrubbing and cleaning, and I know that's an allusion to something, but I wasn't understanding what she meant by scrubbing and cleaning, and then I thought, did she, like, clean her family? Meaning, like, did she kill her family? Mrs. Johnson takes Lucky to the kitchen, and there's blood everywhere. Her husband is a paraplegic. I was like, did she eat her husband? I think he's a paraplegic because he served in the army as well, and maybe have gotten his parts maybe like amputated. I don't know. I'm like, did she cook her children? When she asked about Mrs. Johnson's children, she said, where are your boys? And the oven timer went off, and I was like, oh my God, did she cook her children? But what's interesting is that Lucky brought her husband to see this, and it was gone. So again, this is an illusion, but I love this show because it makes you think, is it an illusion, or is it an illusion, or is Lucky seeing what's actually real whenever this black hat man is around? Like, is everything covered up in the real world, but like this black hat man allows her to see the truth? Or does he make her see an illusion to make her crazy? I don't know what's going on. See, I sound really lost for words, and I apologize about that, but I was a little bit confused this episode. So let's talk about Betty. So Betty was confronted by Lucky in the beginning, saying, listen, I'm here. I don't know what you're trying to do, but I'm here. I really loved Lucky, how she stepped up to Betty, and Betty was a little bit intimidated, even though she was acting like she was unbothered. What was interesting is that Betty ended up going to her father and her mother for help because she is trying to move. And I thought, I think she was feeling defeated in that moment. I don't know. I don't know why she went to her parents, because I thought she was going to stick to her guns with the neighbors and try to force the Emerys out. But something really eerie happened, and I want to make a trigger warning about sexual assault before I talk about this, because something very weird happened with Betty and her father. The fact that, there's something eerie about how her mother was treating her. She wished that Betty had not even come back, and that's her daughter. Her dad didn't know about her husband, whether she had kids, which shows that they're estranged, but why? Then, something happens where the dad invites her to stay longer than she intended. I was going to run you a bath. You hardly had a visit. And Betty was repulsed. Betty didn't want to. She tried to avoid it. She even asked her mother, who's treating her coldly, to please write the check. And it kind of alluded to something really sinister. Maybe she was abused by her father in the past. because of the way he ran the bath and how she was nervous and she ran out of there. That was really triggering, and I didn't really like that scene. But it also made me think, maybe this is the reason she doesn't have kids. Maybe something happened to her in her past by her father or someone, or I don't know. But I was just thinking, why doesn't she have kids? She's jealous of Mitch because Mitch is pregnant. She got triggered when Lucky mentioned, like, that's why you don't have kids. You don't have to worry about a family. And then now her dad asked about kids and she doesn't have any. And she kind of feels like, oh yeah, we can't, you know, or she said we can't, but, you know, she tried to make up an excuse, but the truth came out. She said we can't, not that we've been trying. So something happened to her where she can't have kids, and we're gonna figure this out later on. Also with Betty, we have to note that there's something going on with the milkman. It seems that the milkman is taking a liking to Betty. They mentioned that in episode 1, that he only has eyes for Betty, even though she's a married woman. And it seems that he wants her and he's willing to do anything for her, but he just wants her to ask, because she hasn't made it clear yet. But I think Betty knows that. And so Betty's low-key seducing him, maybe keeping him in her pocket, because there's a strain that's happening in Betty's marriage right now over this, you know, this racist act that she wants to do against the Emerys. Clark is just not on board, just like Mitch. She just doesn't care. He doesn't care as much as Betty does, and that's causing a friction in her marriage, and she doesn't feel like Clark is being the man that she wants him to be. But it seems that this milkman is alluding to that too, saying, listen, it takes a certain man to do what you want to be done, and I'm that man, so if you need me, make sure you call me. And so I think that's a foreshadow to see, you know, with the fight that happened between Betty and Clark, and the milkman, you know, kind of inserting himself in that way. And I think Betty tried to seduce him a little bit at the table. It's a foreshadow moment that possibly the milkman might end up, you know, doing Betty's bidding as far as trying to terrorize the Emerys. So the episode ends with Henry being taken to the Johnson's house and seeing absolutely nothing that Lucky is trying to show him. But because Henry's also facing his own delusions and illusions, I know he knows that something's up with him. So it's not, you know, a shot in the dark that something's up with his wife, even though he can't see what she sees. So he puts his hand on hers, and that just shows how supportive he is regardless. But I think it's because he knows that this is not completely made up. He knows something's happening with her, even though he doesn't really understand. And that just shows a moment. Like, I feel like after this, they need to start coming together and realizing everyone in his family is going through something very bad and eerie, especially living in this house. And so they need to come together, talk about it so they can get out of there or figure out what they're going to do. And the scene ends with them making love, or attempting to make love, in the room. And there is that shadowy man in the back corner, and they just end it right there. So it's a cliffhanger. We have to see what happens in episode 5, but that wraps up episode 4. Leave a comment below. Let me know how you feel about episode 4. Make sure you guys tune in and subscribe, because 6 through 10 will be up very soon. And if you haven't seen the other reviews, make sure you check them out. Bye.